Xio, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I've been really excited about this.
And for taking a little time out of your Coastal Magic weekend as well.
It's been great.
What have you thought of Coastal so far? We're recording this on Friday afternoon, so it's the end of day one, essentially. Yeah. How's it been so far?
It's been great. It's my first time coming down. I've heard a lot of great things about it, and so, I was really curious and excited to come down. But I got here last night, so I didn't get to see the first sort of evening of it, and so today was like, whoa, you're right in it, but it was really cool.
Awesome. I'm so excited that you're here. We met at RWA last summer
in New York.
And your book, Frankie and Johnny, that you had on the table, it just grabbed my eye. Your cover for that is so just...
Thank you.
I can't explain why, but the music and the guy on the cover, the whole thing was like, I need to read that.
Oh, cool.
It took a while, as can happen with TBR stuff.
Yeah, I can imagine your list.
Right? And I only read it a couple of weeks ago, and it blew my mind. And then on Monday, this past week, you dropped Frankie and Johnny Let the Music Play, which is the sequel.
Yeah. It was my birthday surprise.
I felt like it was a big surprise just to be like, oh my God, the sequel's here, yay!
Yeah.
Tell us about Frankie and Johnny, these two books, and about these characters that, frankly, I just fell madly in love with.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, it was one of those things where sometimes you work on a book and you kind of have a character in your head or storyline or something. You're like, you tinker with it, and you're like, okay, where's it going to be set, and what's going to be the black moment, what's going to be the conflict or whatever. These two, Frankie actually just started talking to me one day, and it was because my laptop died.
Of all things.
Like literally my laptop died, and I have, in my music, I use Mac for everything. So I don't write on the Mac. I'll do like formatting on it, but I don't write. So I couldn't do anything on my laptop. I sent it back to the manufacturer for fixing, and I was like, okay, well, what do I do? And so I was sitting in front of the Mac, and I opened up the Word document or pages and just started typing, and it was Frankie, like speaking in first person, which I don't really do, and like the whole thing. So he just sort of like landed in my head, and he's probably the closest character to me that I've written, in that his relationship to music is similar to mine. So yeah, and I was like, well, who would he fall in love with? Like, who is he with now, or what was his situation? And, and he told me his story, and I thought, man, this is really cool. He's such an unusual character for me in what he does and his relationship with the people in his life, and also his relationship with music and how music sort of dictates his life, He built his life around it. So, that was the guy. And he just sort of said, write my book. And so I did.
How did Johnny come into the equation?
So I thought, I was a college DJ, and I used to work the late shift. And I always loved it because even though we were a college station, they were preparing you to be out in the real world. And so they gave you like, a playlist or whatever, and you had to log everything. But on the late shift and the weekend shifts, you could pretty much do whatever you wanted to do. And so I thought that would be the perfect world for Frankie. Like, nobody's saying, here's the songs you're going to play, here's the top 40 or whatever it is. It was whatever his extensive music knowledge. His program director was like, I want to use that. Let's just give you your own slot in this time that we're not worried about, making revenue. This is your baby. And so it's his world. Like, nobody else is in the station at that time of night. Like, it's dark except for his booth. He can take off his shoes, put his feet up on the desk, whatever. And so what would be the worst, like the nightmare for him would be for someone else that he doesn't know, a stranger coming into that space, And so I was like, okay, well, we're going to have... The station needs renovations, as a station might. And when would be the best time to do that? When very few people are there. And when would that be? That would be during his shift. So here's this quiet guy, just shows up. And he's very nice and everything. There's nothing particularly unusual about him. He's just there and does his work. But for some reason, Frankie is intrigued by this person who doesn't try to chat with him all the time and who everyone else seems to like, And he's like, well... maybe I need to get to know this guy. Maybe I've been a little harsh on him because he's been invading my space, and maybe I'll give him a break. And he's also super hot, so maybe. So, yeah.
The thing that struck me so much about the courtship here is that it, again, relies so much on music because Frankie wants to play Johnny the song of his mood for the night. And it's always Frankie's thing that you can't request the song. You have to tell him your mood, and he'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Now, you've got a lot of singer, songwriter, family background in music. How did you structure those particular things to this is going to be the mood and this is going to be the song, and weave that into the story in a way that the readers could all go, that song, I get it.
Right. It was interesting because, we have to be wary of using music in the books. We can't use the lyrics and things like that. So I'll mention something about the lyric or about the title or whatever, but I figure titles are fair game. You can use a title, you can use it. But when I wrote fan fiction, because I started out writing Buffy fan fiction, I would use entire songs in there, and you can do that, and you call them songfic, and everything, but you can't do that when you're publishing a book. So I was like, well, how can I capture the mood of the song or the meaning behind that song? There's a scene when, what does John say? You might know better because I haven't read it in a while. But John says to him, he gives him a word, and Frankie's like stumped. And he's like, well, what the kind of mood is that? Like, I don't know what to play for that. And John's like, never mind. And he gives him another one. He's like, no. It's like a challenge for him, But the songs, they just popped into my head, honestly. It was like, if I'm in this scene and this was the word that somebody gave me, this is the song that I would play. I would play this Massive Attack song, or I'd play this Fever Ray song, or I'd play this, whatever. But I have such an extensive catalog of music in my head at all times that it's not hard for me, And I don't say that to sound like weird or arrogant or anything, but it's just like songs, I can just pluck them out of my head. And so I gave Frankie that gift.
And I love that you did Spotify playlists.
Yeah.
Because I could go if I didn't know the song, it's here, and now I can just play that playlist when I want to hear and relive the music of the...
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do is to share music with people, and I love sharing super obscure Norwegian bands or whatever with people. When I was growing up, I grew up in the R&B soul world, and I was a rock baby. I loved rock. So we would sit literally for an afternoon on a Saturday, and I would play stuff for him, and he would go, well, that bass line is from this band from 1955, and that guitar lick is from... And he would do that and sort of break it down. And so Frankie's thing is he loves to share music with his audience and with whoever he's with. And that was one of the things that he butted heads with his ex about, was that Garrett didn't really get the music thing. He's like, yeah, music is cool and everything, but why are you so obsessed? Why is this your thing? So to have Johnny respond to him in that way and see how wonderful a gift it is, it was like, oh my God, he gets me, you know what I mean? And he's hot, you know what I mean? He's hot, and he's, so yeah, it was important for them to share that.
I'm about 25% in now to the sequel. And I'm happy to be back in that world, and I can't wait to see these two get their HEA. I mean, there was a little hint at the end of the first book that there was at least a happy for now kind of lurking there.
Yeah, because we weren't sure what was going on with him. Yeah.
Yeah, and at 25%, I'm still not totally sure what's going on.
Wait, I'm trying to remember, 25%, so where are you now?
They've gone out to the big dinner. Where he took Frankie to the really...
Sampan, which is my favorite restaurant in Philly.
Oh, it's a real place,
It's a real place. And those edamame dumplings are ridiculous. So if you're in Philadelphia, commercial, no.
And so they've just ended dinner.
Okay. Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
So Xio's sitting here going, I know exactly where you are and what you have yet to come.
Okay, yeah.
What was it like getting back to the world?
I was wild because I knew the story. When I wrote the book on my Mac, I think it was something like 35,000 words in 3 days.
Wow.
It just poured out, and it included some of book 2. But when I decided to put that story into the anthology last year, it needed to be 20,000 words. And literally what I had done was cut it right there. So it stopped at the end of, I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but it stopped where book 1 stopped. It was 20,000 words almost exactly. And I was like, ooh, okay, that works, But coming back to them, getting back into Frankie's head was a lot of fun because even though I'm in music all the time, he's not stuck, but he is a little bit obsessed with a certain period of time between 1982 and 1995. He pulls a lot of music from that era. And so going back into his playlist was a lot of fun, pulling out the Massive Attack and pulling out, Old Cure or pulling out whatever it was. And so it was really fun going back into his wheelhouse,
The piece of music that you've pulled out so far in the second book that was it actually made me go put on the album was Prince's Sign of the Times.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I feel like that is the most underrated of the Prince albums in that era.
Yeah. There's going to be more. Like, obviously, I'm going to continue in this world, but it won't be
That
centered
is
on.
such good news.
It won't be centered on these two. It'll be centered on Dyer.
Oh,
And
cool.
Dyer's story, I can't even tell you what it's going to be about because it's a huge spoiler. And I dropped a little bit of hint in both of these books, but I don't think anybody got it. So I'm like, oh, they're going to be totally blindsided. So it's just fun and scary at the same time. But his thing with Prince will come into play again. His
Okay.
relationship with Prince. But so you were in the radio station scene when they talk about Purple Rain, or is that later? Am I spoiling it? I could be spoiling it.
I don't think I've
Okay,
encountered
so-
Purple Rain yet. I think
Okay.
the first Prince that we've talked about in the book so far
When he plays
was
If I
Sign
Were
of
Your
the Time.
Girlfriend.
And,
Yeah,
plays If I Was Your Girlfriend.
Yeah.
And I was wondering what he would pick. And initially he was headed towards something I couldn't remember, which is why I
I think it was Dorothy Parker, was it?
That
The Ballad
sounds
of Dorothy
right.
Parker, yeah.
And I actually had to go back to my copy and start playing it
Yeah.
just to like, oh yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And the people who are listening to us are like, wow. But that was the thing, and I said it in my review, so it shouldn't be that surprising. Like, I wanted to be a music journalist,
Right, yeah.
and I kind of wanted to be a DJ,
Yeah.
and that is probably why I have a podcast now. And so much of that book just clicked
Yeah.
as things, and you really make everything around the music of the radio station almost becomes its own character. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really part of Frankie, but it's almost its own
Yeah.
thing too.
Yeah. It's his found family as well. Because he is an orphan here. He moves from Scotland and moves to Philadelphia, and he's by himself. Even the people that he moved in with initially in the house are gone. So he's kind of, Dyer and Nikki and those guys are his family. I mean, when he was dating Garrett, his friends became his friends, but they weren't really his friends,
Right.
So he really retreated into the music, and music is his baby. And so he has these people that understand that they get it too on a different level. That music Nikki runs the station because she loves music. Dyer is a DJ, so those are his people. And now he has Johnny.
Why the Scottish for him? Where did that come from? Because I get the Philly because you're from Philly.
Yeah, I think that happened because I was working on another book and the characters were Scottish. And so this is kind of embarrassing, but his head popped into my head with a Scottish accent. And so when I finished the first draft, I guess it was, I was going to release it as a different book. Everything that I had written was going to put it out. And so I started talking about it with friends and stuff, and a friend invited me to her Facebook group and said, come in and talk about whatever book I had out, and then talk about what you're working on now. And I was like, oh, cool. And she was like, and do a reading. And I was like, well, do I read from the book that's out, or do I read from, because I was so in love with this story, and I was like, I'll read this. So I read it in Frankie's voice. And Kristen Higgins tuned in, happened to log on while I was doing it, and she tweeted and was like, oh my God, Xio is in this group reading this in this Scottish brogue, and it's awesome. And I freaked out, and I was like, oh my God, somebody is listening and tweeting about this. Like, what? People are going to come and hear this, and it's so awful. But I was so in love with Frankie at that time. But yeah, I don't know why Scotland. I guess it's just, residual from the other book.
Sure. And I was totally down with that too, because I've had my Outlander phase.
Yeah,
And so,
yeah.
I'm down with the Scottish guy.
Yeah, and he's sort of, I wanted him, it was the image of him, I wanted him to feel a little bit othered in his life. Growing up in Glasgow, looking like he does, there aren't a lot of people around there that look like that. And so there's a line in the first book where he says, it takes a lot more effort to be different here. Like there, I was automatically different. Here, it takes a lot more effort, and I don't bother to make that effort, which is one of my favorite lines in that book.
It's one of the things that I really like about him too, is that he's inhabited things in the U.S. so well, and he didn't have that in his home country. It's more.
He feels way more at home here.
It's another element of that found family, I think.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Especially Philadelphia and that area. He talks about it as if he grew up there. And he talks about the neighborhood, the neighboring areas, especially in book 2, the drive up and down and where he likes to walk and all that stuff. Much more. You don't hear him talk about Glasgow that way.
No, you really don't. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I grew up over there.
I grew up over there with those people, whatever. I'm here now, yeah.
You mentioned a little bit your massive music vocabulary and everything, and we were tweeting a few weeks back, and you revealed that your father actually is a co-writer on one of the Spinners' biggest songs.
Yeah.
I'll Be Around. You've been around music forever, and you
Yeah.
songwrite too. All of this creativity is so awesome. How is it two distinctive things for you to be a songwriter and a fiction writer, or do they really come together more than people might think?
I think it depends on the writing style. Like for me, I think I write somewhat lyrically, like melodically, the way the rhythm of my words will go. And I didn't notice that. Somebody pointed it out to me after like my second or third book, and they were like, I can tell that you were a songwriter or a poet or something, because just the cadence of the words was a little bit different. And I'll chop sentences up and do things and stuff that's completely grammatically incorrect, but it works when you're, the mouth feel is great, or it works well in your brain.
You just have to train your editor to deal with it.
Kind of, yeah, But it was funny, like I remember we're going back to the fan fiction thing. I remember one of the fic writers asked me to write poetry for her series. She was like, you're a songwriter, write poetry. And I was like, I've never written poetry. She's like, you're a songwriter, you can write poetry. And I was like, oh, I didn't think of that. And it was the same thing with this. It was like, how do I go from writing songs, because fanfic was fanfic, you're playing in someone else's sandbox, but how do I go from writing songs to writing long form fiction? And that transition was easier than I thought it was going to be, just because I could translate that musicality to the cadence of the words, if that makes sense.
I think so. It kind of clicks in my brain.
Yeah.
So when do we get Dyer's book? Do you have a rough projection on that?
I don't know. I want to get it out this year, because I'm in sort of a limbo right now with my publisher, because I have a 4-book series coming out with Source Books, and I'm trying to figure out what that scheduling is going to be like, and then I can get, because I'll have like a queue of books lined up that are coming out. The Alter Love series is in the wings, and I think I told you earlier that Frankie and Johnny's second book was not supposed to come out this week. It was later this month. The second book in the Alter Love series was going to come out, but you
this is my fault if you're an Alter Love fan and we're like, where's that book?
Yeah, sorry. But yeah, I thought, this is really cool, I'm just going to do this. So I went back in and cleaned it up and hopefully didn't mess it up and put it out. I have to get 2 of the Alter Love books out before June, because I'm going to Oslo for an event there, and they're big fans of that series. And so maybe after that, then I'll get to Dyer's. So it's like late summer, early fall.
Okay.
Something like that.
Not that far away.
Not that far, yeah.
So let's talk about Alter Love. That was a nice segue you gave me right there to turn that corner.
Sure.
Tell me about that series.
So, in case you haven't figured this out, I'm a big fandom girl. I've actually only ever been in 2 fandoms. One was Buffy, and the one I'm in now is a TV show from Norway called Skam, Skam if you're looking it up. And I totally fell in love with it. That's why I'm learning Norwegian, or have been learning Norwegian. And I write fanfic in that world. And those readers, they want more and more and more. And so I thought, okay, we'll take sort of the Norwegian aspect of this, and I'll see what I can do in a series. And again, here we are in music. Twin brothers, Norwegian rock stars. The first book, they're on the rise. They're just sort of starting out, and they're doing the college circuit. And they landed this University of Philadelphia, made up University of Philadelphia, where one of the heroes is still a student. He's a grad student there, and they meet, and it's like insta love, which I don't like to write a lot of insta love, but it's definitely like they connect right away, and it's like burn hot and fast. And then Jessen is pulled away by his duties to the band and stuff, and they're going up, and he sort of leaves Ian behind. So you pick up in the book when he comes back to say, hey, I made the mistake, and I'm here, and let's figure this out, kind of thing. But yeah, that whole series was inspired by my love of Skam and Norway and Norwegian and all of that, and then the music stuff. So.
That is very cool, and it explains why. Before we hit the record button, she actually was learning a little bit of Norwegian before we started, and now it all makes sense.
Yeah, I have that app on my phone that everyone has where you're learning a new language. But yeah.
These Alter Love and Frankie and Johnny are your first MM books. Mm-hmm. What brought you in to the MM universe after several books that were MF?
Yeah, I guess I've always read MM, or as in the fic world they call it slash fiction, and just never read it in publishing. I just never read published books. I don't know why. And then, gosh, you would probably know better than I what year it was, maybe 2016 when Him came out. Serena
that sounds
Bowen.
About right. And
yeah.
Such a good book. I'm such a Serena fan.
Yeah, me too. And so when I was like, oh, Serena, okay, I'll read it. And I absolutely loved the book and told everybody that I knew to buy it. And then at the Rita Awards, when they won, neither of them were there. And so I took a picture of the screen with their name on it and the read and everything, and I sent it to her, and she's like, oh my God, thank you so much. And I just, that was like my gateway drug, was that particular book. And I had in my head, my very first book, which was MF, The Callum, was initially going to be a series, and the antagonist in that first book was going to get his own book, and it was going to be my first MM. And I said to my readers, like, so how do you guys, that wasn't, you never know, never know if anybody's going to be weird and whatever. But they were like, yeah, that would be awesome. And so that was going to be it. And then I sort of like got away from that series completely. So when Skam happened and this series, when Alter Love popped into my head, I was like, ooh, here we go, okay, And yeah, so that's how it started. And now I've been on this MM kick for a while. Frankie and Johnny happened, and so yeah, I love it.
Are you kind of splitting between MF and MM now?
Yeah. Although I've always had queer characters in my books. Even Falling Stars has some, and my series with source books will have some too. So it's not like I'm getting away from the community completely. It's just they want a very specific story, so they get that, and I get to have my boys, and I'm happier that way because I have more freedom. I can't imagine writing Frankie and Johnny for a publisher because there's so much music in there, and there's so much, exposition and everything. So I'm not sure how they would feel about that. So
it's hard to say because you stay away from the stuff that they would absolutely hate, like you mentioned, putting lyrics in it.
Yeah.
But there is a lot there.
Yeah.
And going back to the music, because we keep going back there.
Yeah, sure.
Did you worry about setting it too much in a specific time frame, or does it work, I guess, for Frankie and Johnny at least, because that's Frankie's realm of music? And do you have any of the same issues in Ultra Love of referencing things that people just may not know?
Yeah, what I try to do when I write stuff that's in an industry that everyone knows about but don't know about, the behind the scenes stuff, is I'll give them a glimpse inside behind the curtain and try to explain things in not like a academic way, but just sort of and this is through plot or through conversation what's happening, rather than saying, and here's a thing that does the thing and thing, the thing, you know what I mean? Because that just gets boring. It's like it becomes a manual at that point, right? So I try to give them contextual, descriptions of what's going on, or what, when he's working in the console, I try to keep it in a way that anybody could picture that console and doesn't get too technical, or the station identification that has to happen once an hour, things like that. Just to make it part of the conversation he's either having with John or in his head or whatever it is. I almost missed the cue for the station ident. You know what I mean?
Which totally cracked me up in the first part of the new book, because it's that could have been automated, but that's not how he works.
That's not how he works. And the fact that he does it so effortlessly, it's like breathing to him doing this, and that John throws him off. He forgets to listen for the end of a song. He forgets.
Gets so flustered.
He gets
so cute.
flustered, you know what I mean? And he's like, I'm not like this. Why is this happening, So.
How did you find your way to romance writing?
So
there's a story there. I could tell by that laugh.
There's a story there. So I accidentally wrote a book. I was on the road. I used to tour in the UK and Portugal with my band, and I would get bored between shows or whatever. And so I started just tinkering on my blog. And I think I wrote, 500 words or 1,000 words of this what if situation between these two actors. And people were like the 30 followers I had on Tumblr were like, oh, I like that, write some more. And so I wrote some more. 200,000 words later, and 9 months later, I had this giant thing, which became Falling Stars and Starlight. But they'd read it, and it'd gone viral. People were talking about it on Twitter that I didn't know. And I remember going on Twitter one day, and a friend of mine was discussing the chapter that I had just posted with her friend. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she was like, oh my gosh, this woman writes this thing and it comes out. And I was like, that's mine. And she didn't believe me. So I sent her the next chapter, and she was like, oh my God. So I had no idea. And then I asked a friend of mine who was in this world. I was like, what do I do with this? She was like, publish it. I'm like, but they just read it for free. Why would they want to pay for it? But she dragged me to the RWA conference, and I knew nothing about anything, nothing. And she said, I'd never read a romance, and she was like, here are some titles that you can check out, and they were all over the place. There was like a sweet beach read. There was some really high heat stuff, everything in between. I think J.R. Ward was in there somewhere, and I was like, I read like 3 of them, and I was like, oh my God, this is not what I thought. And then went, and that was sort of it. Went there and said, okay, maybe I can do this.
That's amazing. So you hadn't even really read romance.
Hadn't read
before.
romance. I was a sci-fi fantasy person. I was a huge Anne Rice fan growing up. I read a lot of science fiction, and even now I read a lot of urban fantasy, like Jim Butcher and stuff like that. So yeah, I was not a romance person. And then once, of course, I discovered it, I just read everything I could get my hands on. But
Sure.
I was definitely stumbling into it.
Were you writing fanfic before you wrote this long?
I hadn't written fanfic in like 6 years or something. Buffy, I don't know if you've ever watched Buffy, but there's a lot. Spike was my favorite character. I was this Buffy. And I wrote a lot of fix-it fic, where like I didn't like the way things happened with Spike and Buffy, so I would fix that. And then after the series ended, I wrote a couple of long pieces about what could have happened afterward that didn't happen. Like, things on the show didn't happen that way, this is how it should have gone, kind of thing. But even writing those things, and I think my longest piece was probably 60,000 words, but even having written that, I didn't think, oh, I could write a book. Do you know what I mean?
Even though you'd written book length.
Even though I'd written book length. And it's crazy to think about that now, because there are so many authors that come out of fandom. The Twilight fandom alone has birthed I don't know how many authors. So,
right.
So it's weird for me to think in retrospect but that was my view. I was like, I'm not a writer. I'm not an author. She's like, you just wrote 200,000 words. Like, what are you talking about?
And here you are.
And here
not
I
so many
am,
years
7
later.
years later, yeah. Not quite 7 years later.
That's amazing. I've heard so many stories over the course of this show, and that's one that you just kind of stumbled into it because you were just writing.
Yeah. Just writing for fun, yeah.
Is there another type of romance genre that you want to write in that you haven't done yet?
I've written one hockey romance. And I love hockey. It's one of my favorite sports. And it's MF. And I want to write more MF hockey, but I also want to write MM hockey. Not taking off of Serena and Elle stuff, but I would love to write MM hockey. I think there's a lot of potential there for beautiful relationships.
Yes, please. Please
Yes,
write that book.
Yeah. And at one point I thought about writing a soccer romance. It was during the World Cup, and I was like, I wonder if this is a thing, because I like soccer as well. But yeah, I'm a sports person. To watch, not to perform. To watch the sports. My husband plays like in a soccer league and, like a beer league or whatever, but yeah, I'll just sit on the sidelines and watch. Or write about it.
Or both.
Or both,
Yeah.
But yeah, I think hockey is probably my next one after I finish a couple of the lines I have going now.
I know what to ask you for now in 2021. So we've talked a little bit about more Frankie and Johnny, more Ultra Love. What else is on your horizon, whether it's MM or MF?
I have a book. I mean, I write a lot of standalones within series. Like I don't like cliffhangers that much, even though Falling Stars and Starlight, when they were cut, it was a huge cliffhanger. I couldn't even call Falling Stars a romance because of the way it ended, which I didn't know that either, at the time. But Camden, which was sort of my light romantic suspense book, has 2 other books planned for that. So, and there are people who are waiting patiently for those books. So I have to get back to those as well. Alter Love is my focus this year, and then I'll probably do the sequel to Camden this year as well, and then I'll finish up Frankie and Johnny's World. It's funny because like I put it out as a duo now because there was no series name, and now once Dyer's book comes out, it's not going to be Frankie and Johnny. It's going to be something else. So I have to come up with like a different series name or something. So I might do an omnibus of Frankie and Johnny and then make that part of the series,
Yeah, that makes sense.
And there's a character that I mentioned in there, Simon, he's a DJ. He is the one who's responsible for most of the revenue of the station because he's syndicated.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and he is a former music star who fell on hard times through his own doing, like partied too hard. And I'm spoiling this totally, so don't listen if you don't want to be spoiled. But his band leaves him in his hotel room. They're sick of him, so they leave him in his hotel room.
Oh, that's
after
harsh.
a night of like whatever. They cut him out of the band. He gets written out of the band. They send him a check. They say you'll get your royalties, and that's it. They're done. So he gets stranded in a hotel room in Philadelphia, and and spends all his money like living in this hotel, and ends up a DJ at the same station that Frankie
He's got a story with that whole abandoned in the hotel room.
Yeah,
I can't think of a band breakup story that's gone quite that hard off the top of my
Well,
head.
he earned it. He earns it, honestly. He's a hard person to like, even in his own book.
I'll let you get through 2020 with
Yeah,
your
2020
plan.
is pretty solid right now, especially with the source book stuff. Those are big books. It's really in my wheelhouse. It's an all-female rock band. The lead singer, again, is Norwegian, but the first book is not about her. It's about this woman who grew up loving music. She's incredibly talented. Her mother is semi-famous, and so she hates her mother's desire. She would do anything to be famous, and so she grows up with this abhorrence for fame, and then ends up in a situation that could help her achieve her real dream with this band who's on the cusp of stardom. And she's like torn between like doing this thing that could get her what she wants, or just like going, no, I can't deal with that. So yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, it's set in my world. It's right in my world. So,
Nice.
yeah.
So much good stuff going on. What is the best way for everyone to keep up with you online so they know when all this is happening and coming out?
Well, I am a social media butterfly, so you can catch me everywhere. Xio Axelrod. Instagram is my main one. Twitter, of course. XioAxelrod.com. And if you're feeling really brave and want to know more about Skam, I'm on Tumblr under Xionin, Xionin. But that's like only for the brave, because it's a rabbit hole.
We will link to all of those good things. Awesome. I will say from an Instagram standpoint that you never know when she may ask to get your mood and have a little Frankie and Johnny moment.
Yeah, there's going to be more of that.
And get your mood and send you a song. I got a great Police song just a few days ago.
Because he's obsessed with them, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
He really is. Yep.
Yeah.
So thank you, Xio, so much for spending some of your coastal magic time with us and for such wonderful books.
Really, really appreciate you having me.